What's going on, everyone? I appreciate y'all tuning into this podcast. Those of y'all tuning in, thank you. This week, we've got a good slate of college football games this weekend. It's not the best, and it's rarely that you see great slate after great slate, but we've still got USC and Colorado, LSU versus Ole Miss, Notre Dame versus Duke. Is Notre Dame, coming off that depressing loss last week, going to be in a similar situation? Are they going to lose again, or are they going to respond? Nonetheless, we're going to be with our eyes glued to the TV, like I know we always are. And let's just jump right into this episode. Of course, as y'all know, that's textbook. So this weekend, it started off the big game everyone's been talking about, and of course, all the stars are going to be out for this game. It's reported that LeBron, Bronny, Snoop, Matthew McConaughey, all going to be at this game. USC versus Colorado. Now, Colorado has been that Cinderella story. It's been that probably the best story in sports. They come off of a beatdown from Oregon. Now, how are they going to respond this week? Is Travis Hunter going to be available? He says he wants to play, but Coach Prime isn't having it. Says that Travis's future is a lot brighter than his. So we don't know if Travis is going to play or not. But here are the keys to the game for each team. And for USC, they're going to have to generate pressure because we saw how vulnerable that Colorado offensive line was against Oregon. So USC has to generate pressure. And then secondly, defense. That USC defense has been giving up chunk after chunk. And to lesser opponents, like last week, they gave up 28, and Arizona State was pretty much in that game until late, and it was Arizona's own mistakes. But that was even with Jaden Rashada out. So you can't be giving up 28 to these lesser opponents and then face a Colorado offense who we don't know if Travis Hunter is going to play. But it's still a good offense, and you like Colorado's chances against that USC defense, but it's always going to be up against and up to that Colorado offensive line. And then for Colorado, what are their keys to the game? Well, they're going to have to control the trenches. As we saw last week, they got bullied in the trenches. So how are they going to respond? And then defensively, they just have to force field goals. Because up against this USC offense, you would love it. In a perfect world, you would get about 50% on third down. But the reality of the story is it's probably going to be anywhere from 25 to maybe even 35% success rate on third down for the Colorado defense. So you can bend, but don't break. When USC gets into the red area, you have to be stout. You're going to have to force them to get field goals, and that's a W for Colorado if that does happen. Nonetheless, it should be an exciting game. And let's look at the scenario for USC, because this is a team that a lot, and even including myself, had projected to go into the college football playoff before the season began. USC is currently ranked 8th, and their defense, that seems to be the part of this team or the unit that is always keeping them back, because we know their offense is going to be fantastic under Lincoln Riley, and Caleb Williams is having another superb season. But their defense is going to have to be stout, and they have all of the talent you would think, because they're in California. California has 4 5-star recruits all over the place, especially defensively. Then they had a very successful transfer portal on the defensive end. So it's all up to Alex Grinch. So far, he hasn't been up to par, and he hasn't passed any of the exams yet. Well, he gets a midterm, or he gets an exam that he has to pass this week. And for USC, if we are who we thought they were going to be, and that's a college football playoff team, they really have to make a statement this week to what their Pac-12 colleagues did and either blow out Colorado or shut them out. You're going to have to do either one of those things if we want to take you very seriously about being a college football playoff team. That's the end of my first segment of this podcast. I appreciate everyone tuning in. And if you are tuning in, you're going to want to go ahead, go to my YouTube account, follow me on social media, type in That's Textbook Sports in the search bar, click on the profile, click follow, share this video. Thank you. Now, my next segment is going to be talking about who's going to end up as the best team in the Big Ten. In my opinion, and there's a lot of others who think that the Big Ten is arguably the best conference in college football. You have Michigan. I think Michigan, this is one of the most talented Michigan teams that they've had in a long time with Will Johnson, J.J. McCarthy. Now, they haven't looked really good so far, and they've played really like lower level opponents, and it hasn't been satisfactory as what you would want from a team that you think is going to be in the college football playoff and make a run at the championship. But they're still talented. And then, of course, you've got Ohio State. They got a really impressive win against Notre Dame last week. The biggest question for them is, of course, going to be the quarterback. But to me, I believe Penn State's going to be the best team in the Big Ten just because this team is scattered with NFL talent. And I'm going to list the players that are projected to go into the NFL either this year or next. You have Drew Aller, the quarterback, Nicholas Singleton, Kalen King, Keandre Lambert-Smith, Katron Allen, Olu Fashanu, Chop Robinson. Besides maybe, the usual like Ohio State, Alabama, Michigan, Georgia, and those sort of teams, what other teams can say that they have this type of NFL talent? There's not very many. And then I know the narrative about James Franklin teams is that they never really perform. Well, he also hasn't had a team that's this talented. So you see, when they had their huge runs with Trace McSorley and Saquon Barkley, they were a solid football team. Sometimes you might have thought that they overachieved with what they had. But now they actually have that guy at quarterback. Drew Aller is very impressive. And he's had an impressive start so far this season. So I understand you can't trust James Franklin teams, and under the bright lights they underperform. But also, when has he had a team that's this talented? Now, the problem for Penn State is the problem for a lot of top teams in the Big Ten is that the Big Ten is a gauntlet. You have teams like Wisconsin that are maybe not at the same level as these other teams that we've mentioned, but they're a good football team nonetheless. And if you're facing a top 10, top 15 opponent next week, you don't want to face a team like Wisconsin the following week. Or a team like Iowa, and I know Iowa's offense is ran like it's in the 1960s, the 1950s, but their defense is always solid every single year. I like Penn State in this conference. Just looking at the overall team they have, the Big Ten, of course, is a gauntlet. You're going to have to go up against the Michigans, the Ohio States. Then you'll have to face another opponent and another test in the Big Ten championship game. But I like where this team's going so far and how they've looked. Now that's the end of my second segment. I appreciate every one of y'all. Make sure you like this video and subscribe. So as I've mentioned, it's not the best slate of college football games this week, but we'll always be watching no matter what. We have LSU and Ole Miss. Now, I'm not on board with the whole Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin train, and I like Lane Kiffin. I think he's a very talented, very genius offensive coordinator and play caller. But outside of that, and being a head coach, I really I'm really not on board with it. I'm not on board with Ole Miss or Lane Kiffin. And you see that the games that Ole Miss does win, yeah, it's against lesser opponents, but usually in those games, you find that Lane Kiffin has had A+++ games when he's been the play caller. And in a lot of these top matchups, it seems like sometimes he just gets a little bit too cute. Or maybe he doesn't have the right quarterback. Their defense, it's a solid group, but it's also kind of iffy on the 50-50 side. You don't know whether they'll show up or not. Now, it is going to be in Ole Miss's territory. But I still like LSU in this game because LSU is just the better team. Now, Ole Miss, it might be a close game, and Ole Miss, with Lane Kiffin calling plays, might catch that LSU defense off guard a couple of times to where LSU fans in this game gets a little bit closer than they expected or wanted to. But I still think overall, LSU is just the more complete and better team. So let me know what y'all think with these matchups that I've talked about so far. USC Colorado, who wins that football game? Who wins between LSU and Ole Miss? And then lastly, who do you think is going to end up as the best team in the Big Ten? Because it's a Big Ten that's really top heavy. And then you've got the next level of teams that are really good, and you don't want to face them if you're facing a top opponent the next week. But who do you think comes out of that conference as the top dog? Now, lastly, Notre Dame and Duke. Notre Dame last week came off of a disappointing and a depressing loss against Ohio State. For the final two plays of that game, it was brought up that they only had 10 players on defense. So what Ohio State did on that final play of the game was they ran where that vacated area was, where that 11th defender would have been, scored a touchdown, game over. Obviously, you lose a game like this in the type of matchup that was, you're gonna feel depressed. So how do they respond the next week? Because they better respond because they're playing a Duke team that's really good and you can't overlook them. Duke, they beat Clemson week 1. Now we know how Clemson has looked so far. They've also played some, lower level competition, nothing that really catches your eye. But overall, they're a good team, and if you're Notre Dame, you don't want to be still have that loss to Ohio State last week in the back of your brain. Because you've got a Duke team that's foaming at the mouth, saying, okay, this is our statement game. We beat this team, then people really start paying attention to us, and we really start having our names out there. So for Notre Dame to win this football game, they're going to have to do what was so successful last week in their game versus Ohio State. You're going to have to run the football, establish the run, and use your tight ends just because you don't have that many weapons at receiver. Every single year that I've watched college football, Notre Dame has always had a fantastic offensive line. Utilize that. Make Sam Hartman comfortable in this game. Then, off of the run game, use play action and get the tight ends going on a seam route or a crossing route. Make it really simple, but make it effective for Sam Hartman. And now defensively, Notre Dame has a really good defense. This is a tough and physical team overall. Defensively, I think they'll stand up to the task. But overall, the keys for Notre Dame, run the football, utilize the tight ends, utilize play action. And I know it was a depressing loss last week, but you have to be laser focused on a Duke team that's wanting to knock you down. And for Duke, they've got a path to really make some noise. You look at their games, they have a ranked game versus Notre Dame this week, then a ranked game October 21st versus Florida State. Then they've also got UNC later in the year. So if this team really wants to make some noise and really wants to be talked about in the college football sphere, you win all of those games, we've got, and I know it sounds crazy, but we've got a path where this team gets their name mentioned in the college football playoff. I don't think this team makes it to the college football playoff, But for Duke and all the Duke fans out there, that football program, they really want to make some noise, win those 3 games, and now we really got to talk about you. And so I know I'm going to be dedicating a lot of my podcasts on Friday to college football, but that's all we've got so far for College Football Friday. Once again, like this video, subscribe, share it, be a friend, tell a friend, go to my socials, Twitter or X, YouTube, Spotify, TikTok, type in the search bar, That's Textbook Sports. Like my videos, like, follow, subscribe. Thank y'all. And so last night, the Detroit Lions faced up against the Green Bay Packers, and the Detroit Lions really just controlled that football game for a majority of the game. There was that little slice that Green Bay had where you thought, oh, well, maybe they make it an interesting football game. No, that wasn't the case. Detroit wins 34-20. And if you were looking at the trenches and you looked at the score was a lot closer than what the trenches said because Detroit absolutely manhandled Green Bay on the offensive line, defensive line. David Montgomery, he had a career day. What was it, like 2 rushing touchdowns for 110 plus rushing yards on 26 plus carries. Absolutely absurd. And then Aiden Hutchinson. It was interesting watching that game because you saw Aiden Hutchinson kind of do something that Myles Garrett was doing the week before or last week, where he's like motioning, where he's going to be on the inside facing up against a guard or a center. Then he's motioning out to the tackle position. And it caught to my attention. It's like, maybe a lot of these defensive coordinators are getting creative and motioning out some of their guys so that way they're facing these matchups. And it's like, in an era of football where it's all this offensive creation and offensive innovation, we're going to have our star player in the backfield lined up, and then we're going to motion him here while we're also bringing a guy over here on motion or doing an orbit play. It's like interesting to see that the defensive side of things is finally catching up and isn't going to be as stagnant as it once was. Now, for this Detroit Lions football team, they really made a statement, and I had tweeted out or X'd last night during the game. We know Detroit is the best team in the NFC North, without a doubt. But where do we rank them amongst the top teams in the NFC? Number 1 unanimously has to go to the San Francisco 49ers. Then second, you go with the Philadelphia Eagles. They haven't looked very impressive, but they haven't looked like the Eagles of last year. But still, even with that said, a really good football team. And then third, I have to give to Dallas. They did have a down week last week, losing against the Cardinals and getting controlled in the run game. But you still have to put them third. And then fourthly, I think really belongs to the Detroit Lions in that 4th spot. Just because you consider they have the offensive line. They have a defensive line. The secondary is still a mystery. You don't know where they stand right there or where they rank among other teams with their secondary. Now, they obviously need C.J. Gardner-Johnson. He's a really big piece on that defense, and Brian Branch is having a really superb rookie season. So that's the defensive side of the ball. Offensive line, have the trenches. Sam Laporta. And let me give a shout out to Brad Holmes because he is putting elite draft after elite draft after elite draft. He's done a phenomenal job rebuilding this culture, rebuilding this football team, making it about toughness, physicality, and the trenches. Shout out to Brad Holmes. As I mentioned, they have Sam Laporta, another rookie, performing really well. Jahmyr Gibbs has looked really good, although a lot of people, and this is mainly fantasy people, are upset that Jahmyr Gibbs isn't getting the utilization that their offensive coordinator Ben Johnson said he would. But Gibbs has still looked good. David Montgomery is a nice power back. If this team were to get back Jameson Williams, And if they could have him for a full season, because we remember his rookie year, he was hurt, then he's now dealing with the suspension. If they can get him back and add that deep threat element to this offense with Amon-Ra St. Brown, who's an elite slot option, A+ in the short and intermediate, this is a really dangerous football team. And so this next football game that I'm going to talk about, I'm sure a lot of people saw it last week that we're going to have this game and we're like, oh, should this game even be nationally televised? Should it be televised at all? Maybe, and there were some jokes out there that maybe this football game gets televised on Comedy Central just because it's going to be such a laugh fest. But it is what people consider the two dumpster fires, the Denver Broncos and the Chicago Bears. Who wins this football game? And how bad is it going to look? Or how good is it going to look even though it's bad? If you get what I'm saying. In this football game, I like the Chicago Bears just because you look at that defense of the Denver Broncos and how they were giving up 7-8 yards per rush. Now, if Chicago Bears does rush Justin Fields, which I think they should, and a lot of people have been crying out that Luke Getsy needs to rush Justin Fields, get him involved in the read option. If Chicago does that, I like them. But also, you have to take in that this is an NFL team that just got embarrassed and put 70 points on their head. So you think the following week, especially up against a lesser opponent, that they're going to want to make a statement and say, this is not who we are as a football team. Now, the Denver Broncos football team, you kind of looked at their body language after the loss to Miami. It looked like a football team that really just packed it in, said the season's over with. The same could be said for the Chicago Bears. So while a lot of people may think it's bad, maybe it's comically bad. So bad that sometimes maybe even it's funny. But we'll still be watching this football game, or at least I will. It'll be interesting to see because these are two really bad defenses. Like the Chicago Bears are absolutely, to say formidable in the trenches and in the run game is putting it nicely. Denver should be able to run the football game at will. Russell Wilson has had a really good season, and he's not part of the problem, as I've said. But also, this is a Denver offense that in the second half of games, maybe I don't know what their problem is. Maybe that's because in the first half of games, it's a lot of scripted plays, and you're not having to deal with the other team adjusting. But in the end, I'll still be watching this football game. It'll be entertaining, whether it's entertaining funny or entertaining good, and that this becomes a surprising matchup and a good matchup that we didn't expect. And to my audience, who wins this football game? That's going to be the toughest question to answer all week for week 4. Who wins the football game? So let me know in the comment section what y'all think. And of course, don't forget to subscribe, like this video, follow me on social media, typing in That's Textbook Sports. So after talking about the Battle of Bad, pun intended, let's talk about two really elite teams matching up in week 4. That is the Buffalo Bills versus the Miami Dolphins. Now the Miami Dolphins are on an all-time pace to break all kinds of offensive records as a football team. They've got all this speed. And a lot of people have been mentioning them as like the Golden State Warriors of the NFL, where they have all this innovation. Like Golden State started with the innovation of the 3-ball. Miami is starting with the innovation of speed, athleticism, and the way that they use their two speedsters actually all their speedsters, but the way they use their speedster wide receivers in the backfield and in motions. They're really ahead of the curve offensively. And Tua Tagovailoa, who many people thought was going to be a bust, has really performed at an MVP type of level. He's having that type of season. So this is a Miami Dolphins team that week 1, they beat the Chargers. Then in week 3, they embarrass the Denver Broncos, putting up 70 points. So the whole team has confidence that is sky high. And you can just see it with the team and the type of camaraderie these guys have and the type of vibes within the Miami Dolphins. Now they're going up against a Buffalo Bills team that looks to rewrite the narrative defensively about themselves. Last week, now I know it was against Sam Howell, but this defense performed really well, had 3 interceptions, were first in turnovers all over the place. So it'll be interesting to see how this Miami Dolphins team matches up with the team that's on a similar level to them. Because they've been taking care, like the Chargers, they're a really good football team, but we still don't know about them, especially when it comes to close games. Somehow, some way, they'll find a way to mess it up. Then they play the Denver Broncos. We know how the Broncos season is going so far. Now you get the Buffalo Bills. Your defense, and the defense for Miami is really good. Are they on the same level as the offense? No way. But they're still a really good defense. So how is the defense going to match up against Josh Allen? Because in their matchup last year, when they first played each other, that Miami Dolphins defense responded really well, and they gave Josh Allen and company some fits. So Xavier Howard and Stephon Diggs, that'll be a matchup to look for. And then Miami's defensive line, because I think they have an underrated defensive line. Christian Wilkins on the inside, he's a dominant force. Jalen Phillips is really breaking out, becoming a star. Bradley Chubb, really good player that you like to have. And then it's a Vic Fangio defense, who, as I've mentioned before, Vic Fangio is a defensive wizard. Anywhere he goes to be a part of an NFL organization's defense, they always have some type of success. Now they're missing Jalen Ramsey, and that's key. You'd like to have Ramsey, especially going up against a high caliber, prolific offense. So these are two offenses that we know are going to be slinging the football. They're going to be putting up massive points. So the key to this game is which defense breaks first, because the defense that breaks first is going to lose this game. Is it going to be Miami's? Is it going to be Buffalo's? Because I'm projecting this game to be, I don't know, in the 40s, in the 30s with each other. So that point line may be in the 60s at least, 65, 70. So that means that these defenses are going to be on the field a lot. So who's going to handle that? Which defense is going to break first? Which defense is, when the offense of the opposing team gets into the red area, which defense is going to force field goals? Because these offenses are going to score points, but it's a huge difference from 7 to 3. Let me know, audience, what y'all think. Does this historic pace of this Miami Dolphins offense and the type of innovation they have continue? Does it keep up? Or does it get simmered down a little bit by the Buffalo Bills defense? And do the Buffalo Bills come out of this victorious? Let me know in the comments what y'all think. I appreciate your participation. And so another game that I want to talk about, it's in the afternoon slot, and it's the New England Patriots heading on over to Dallas and facing off against the Dallas Cowboys. Now, this is a game where the Dallas Cowboys really got to watch out. They came off of a depressing and disappointing loss against the Arizona Cardinals. And usually teams that suffer that kind of loss the week before, the next week, they come out with a win. They look like a really dominant team. For Dallas, they can't overlook New England, because New England is a team that I've mentioned that even when they started 0-2, you really got to watch out for them. Just because Bill Belichick, he's always going to have his football team, especially that defense, performing really, really well. Now, this is a Dallas Cowboys offense that in the red zone is 27th. So they're a bottom team in the NFL when they get into the red zone. A lot of that, in my opinion, is because they're missing Kellen Moore's creativity. When you're in the red zone, it's a short and condensed field. So what that means is you need more creative play calls. You can swing the back out into like a flat route and then have a fullback lined up, but use that fullback as a blocker. That's a lot of what Kellen Moore did, using CD Lamb in the slot, which is where CD really thrives. So a lot of their red zone woes, in my opinion, is due to the loss of Kellen Moore. You see, when you're in like midfield or you're outside the red zone, there's a lot more of the field to work with. So there's not a whole lot of creativity that needs to be put into the red zone or to the play calls in general. And going up against a New England Patriots defense with Christian Gonzalez having a all-time great rookie season. I mean, he hasn't come off the field practically at all. He's guarding every single team's number one. We all saw NBC put out the matchup between Christian Gonzalez and Tyreek Hill and how well Christian Gonzalez performed. He's really good. So you got to expect that Bill Belichick always going to find a way to take out your number one option, and Dallas's number one option is CD. So you look out for CD versus Christian Gonzalez. Get your popcorn ready. That's going to be something you want to watch. And then, so where does Dallas go outside of CD? You have Tony Pollard, and usually running backs coming off of serious lower leg injuries the following year don't perform like they used to. He's done really good. Now, is Dallas going to have all their offensive linemen back? Because that was something they're missing. Where the game really lies within the New England Patriots, and they're going to have to get a significant boost from their offense. Their offense has to find something. They don't have a whole lot of weapons that they can go to. So, with that being said, maybe run the football, utilize two tight ends, utilize Gesicki and Henry to block. Now, I know Gesicki isn't the best blocker, but you're going to have to find ways to have, quote unquote, extra offensive linemen, as in tight ends, to block and chip Parsons. So you're going to have to find a way to neutralize Parsons. Now, a lot of teams have had success running at Parsons. Maybe New England does that. I don't know. I don't know if they have the offensive line to do that. But that's the biggest key. Neutralize Parsons, establish the run game, and then, of course, do what New England does every year in every game defensively. So I still like Dallas in this game, and I want my listeners and audience out there, let me know, out of all the matchups I've talked about, who wins and why. And of course, like this video, subscribe, go onto my social media, type in That's Textbook Sports in your search bar for whatever social media app you have. Click on the profile, click follow, and thank y'all. And so that's it. That concludes this podcast episode. That's week 5 of college football summed up in a nutshell for you. That's week 4 of NFL football summed up, of course, in a nutshell for you. Thank y'all for listening. I appreciate it. I appreciate your guys' participation in my podcast. Appreciate all of my subscribers and listeners out there. Thank you. If you have any ideas or any recommendations, topics, or if even you want to debate me on a topic, feel free to let me know, message me, whatever. Let me know in the comment section what your thoughts are. Do you want to debate me? Let me know so we can schedule a time. Thank y'all once again. After week 4 of NFL Sunday football, there will only be 2 teams that'll be winless. So which teams are they going to be? Of course, as I've mentioned continuously, I appreciate your guys' participation. Have a fantastic day. Have a fantastic Friday. God bless. Take care. And until next time,